most loving and humbled pranams at the divine lotus feet of our Divine Mother, Bhagawan Shri Sathya Sai Baba. Jai Sai Ram to you all. I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to share some experiences that I have had with Swami. I was born here in the UK in London. I'm an only child, and my parents, who have always been very hardworking, very dedicated, God-loving, practicing Hindus, have taught me from an early age what love is, what sacrifice is, and what devotion is. While being here in the UK has meant that while Swami was with us in physical form, there has been a large physical distance. In my heart, that has never been the case. I honestly believe that my journey with Sai began with my mother's voice. I can remember as a young child that my mother was always singing songs, singing bhajans, singing the glory of Bhagawan. So it was no surprise that when I started Bal Vikas here in London at the age of 3 or 4, I very quickly gravitated towards singing bhajans. I felt that Nama Sankirtanam, as I understand it now, was such a way to calm myself, to feel close to divinity, and to feel like I was close to Bhagawan. Also, at a young age, I was very fortunate that within my family, I had my mama, my mum's brother, who was an expert musician. And from a young age, he began teaching me how to play the harmonium. In the years that have gone by, sitting down in a group, singing bhajans and playing the harmonium have been a very powerful way for me to connect with Swami. Swami always said that singing bhajans in a group creates a sense of thoughtlessness within the mind, so the mind is actually still and allows you to contemplate on him. And it's in those moments throughout my life, whenever I have encountered difficulties, I have sat down in a group with my harmonium and felt incredibly connected to Swami. My first trip to Prashanti Nilayam came when I was still a small child, maybe 6 or 7 years old. I was very excited to go to Puttaparthi with the desire of meeting Swami, because I had learned so much about him in our Bal Vikas classes. Unlike in school, where you would learn about a historical character and not be able to meet them, I was super excited as a young child that I was able to meet the man with the fuzzy hair. Upon our arrival to Puttaparthi, I unfortunately became very ill very quickly and had been unable to attend darshan for many days. My mum and dad would take it in turns to look after me, while the other would go for darshan. They were very upset, as was I, that we had come all this way to see Swami, and yet their child was unable to attend darshan because of ill health. I remember on what must have been the penultimate day of our trip, I had a burning desire to attend darshan no matter what. My parents were concerned because they didn't feel that I was well enough to go, but I insisted. We were going to go home the next day, and I didn't want to miss out on the opportunity of seeing Swami, even if it was from a distance. So we went for darshan, and I distinctly remember the white gates opening and Swami, in his elegant movement, coming through the gates, moving slowly and serenely as he came closer and closer to us. I remember thinking, I hope he stops here. I hope I can see him up close. And as Swami would have it, after so many days of ill health, he seemed to make a beeline straight for us. He stopped in front of me, ushered for me to get up, and asked me in his loving voice, "And where are you from?" Without understanding at the time the significance of that question and the spirituality therein, I mischievously answered, "London, Swami." And in that moment, I understood that Swami had been there with me all the time. He'd made me and my parents go through this suffering to make that first experience of meeting with him physically that much more the sweeter. And I'm ever grateful that that was my first interaction with him in physical form. I was extremely lucky to have another opportunity to go to Puttaparthi when I was 12 or 13 years old. This time we went in a large group from the UK, and I was one of the designated harmonium players and singers for the trip. We had practiced many sets of bhajans in the UK before we flew out to Puttaparthi. I remember the level of discipline and frugality with which we lived during that trip taught me so much about sealing on desires and living in a way that is simple and focused on divinity. The first incident that I can remember about that trip was that we were extremely fortunate as a UK group to be able to have a private discourse in the inner mandir in the Sai Kulwant Hall. I remember Swami speaking to everybody with love and going round to the whole congregation before he commenced his discourse. I was sat maybe in the third or fourth row. As Swami's discourse continued, I began to develop a severe pain in my leg. In fact, throughout my life, sitting down for more than a couple of hours has been a challenge. I remember that pain in my leg getting worse and worse, and I was doing my best not to make it obvious to the people around me, as I did not want to draw any attention to myself. I kept my focus on Swami and tried my level best to block out the pain. And I remember distinctly that Swami, in mid-sentence, stopped speaking, looked directly at me, and in his very sweet voice said, "Leg pain?" I remember some of the devotees around me laughing because I was the youngest in the group, and I was so embarrassed that Swami had called me out on this. But in the same moment, as I realized that I had given nothing away, and yet he knew that I was going through that pain disappeared, and I was able to sit through the remainder of the discourse without any pain and focus on his every word. The second beautiful experience of that same trip came in the form of the bhajans that we had practiced as a group before we set out to go to Puttaparthi. We had actually prepared a medley of bhajans to present and offer to Swami. And in one of the first few days, Swami gave us the opportunity after a discourse to offer the bhajans and a bhajan medley to him. As I understood it, that had not happened in Puttaparthi for many years. That time, the medley went very well. We were all very happy. Swami blessed us in many ways and then went on his merry way after Aarti, giving darshan to the devotees outside of the mandir. A couple of days later, we had another discourse privately in the inner mandir from Swami. And I was so grateful to have been sat there in the front row with my harmonium in front of me, as Swami came round, asked me my name and the names of the people sat either side of me, talked to us in his loving way, making us feel in that moment that we were the center of the universe, and then materializing vibhuti for all of us. There was a gentleman sat next to me who Swami spoke to for many minutes about the fact that he conducted Shiva Puja every Monday in his house. And in front of my eyes, as a 13-year-old boy, Swami materialized a Shivalingam for the gentleman. And I remember looking at him in awe as I realized this act of divinity that I had just witnessed. After Swami gave us his discourse, he caught us by surprise, as is his way. He said to us, "I want to hear another medley." But we hadn't prepared another medley, and instantly panic set in. Swami said, "I'm going to give darshan to the devotees. You sit here and you prepare the medley." So this is a miracle in itself, that in the inner mandir of the Sai Kulwant Hall, where there is a rule of pin drop silence, Swami allowed us to converse and prepare a medley. We spent a few minutes preparing this medley, and Swami eventually came back from giving darshan to the devotees and sat down for bhajans. We started off well, but because we hadn't practiced before, in the mandir in front of Swami, we made many mistakes in the medley. I, as the harmonium player, was devastated and was tearing up in front of Swami, wondering how things could be going so wrong, as we had come to meet with Bhagawan and to experience his divinity. Yet Swami sat there with the wonderful, peaceful, happy look on his face as he enjoyed the bhajans and indeed the many mistakes that we had made. After the bhajans concluded, he gave us many blessings and left the hall. I personally didn't want to exit the mandir because I was so embarrassed and upset about the number of mistakes that we had made. And yet here comes Swami's latest miracle for us. As we exited the mandir, many devotees came to us and said how beautiful the medley was. I spoke to a couple of students and said, "But we made so many mistakes." And yet nobody in the Sai Kulwant Hall had heard any of the mistakes. Swami had taken our singing and through the speakers in the Sai Kulwant Hall had made sure that all the devotees heard a perfect rendition of that medley. I was in awe of the fact that Swami had put us through that experience, caught us by surprise, and very promptly taught us that actually he does everything, we do nothing. And even if we do something wrong, if we have the right intentions, he makes everything right. And as a teenager, for me, that was a crystallizing moment that I was in the presence of divinity. And this person, this entity that my family and I had been worshipping since I could remember anything, was indeed our Bhagawan. I feel so privileged and fortunate to be on this journey within Swami's organization, continually learning from my elders and those around me, that being disappointed should only be a temporary state, and that I constantly remind myself that everything that happens is Swami's plan. So even if something goes wrong, I understand that there is something better around the corner, because Swami is the embodiment of love and will never let somebody suffer without any reason. There's always a lesson, and I will always try to remember that. Thank you for listening. Jai Sai Ram.